What's going on, you guys? It's your boy John, and a very welcome back to First Person Reviewer. I'm back! I'm back! I know it has been quite a while since my last video. I've had to take a bit of a hiatus due to some unfortunate and recent issues with my back.
My back! Oh, my back!
That was a very paralyzing experience, to say the least. But because of it, I ended up missing out on reviewing and talking about so many projects that have passed over these last 2 months, which was honestly a real bummer for me, guys. I could have just easily picked up where I left off and started working on reviews for upcoming or recent projects, but these titles that I missed were ones that I was genuinely looking forward to covering on here, and it just didn't feel right for me to pass up on them. So with that being said, in order to make it simpler for you guys, I'm going to be adopting a much more of a podcast approach with today's video, featuring only the audio of the reviews. And this video will be a dual review of course, Mortal Kombat 2020 and Invincible Season 1, just to bang them out together and make it easier for you guys to digest.
That's what she said!
Before we get started, just a quick heads up, given the fact that both of these titles came out 2 months back, these will be spoiler reviews. So if you haven't seen either of them and don't want spoilers, there's your warning. That being said, I'm still going to try to do my best and not get too deep into the major spoilers. As always, there will be timestamps in the description below, so feel free to skip around, or if you just want to head straight to the Invincible review and not hear me ramble, because what the hell do I know anyway? I've been looking forward to talking about both of these projects for a while now, and I just really want to thank you guys for your patience and for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. Mortal Kombat 2020 is directed by Simon McQuoid and is actually his legit first movie ever, which is seriously wildly impressive in retrospect. An IP as massive, diverse, and beloved as Mortal Kombat is quite the undertaking as a directorial debut, and despite these challenges at hand, McQuoid's direction is largely competent, flashy, gripping, and downright badass. For anyone completely new to this franchise at the time of watching this video, the film largely adopts the now 20-year-long running video game series of the same title, created by Ed Boon and John Tobias. It began as an outrageous and now iconic 2D arcade fighter that launched back in October of 1992 and then transitioned into a cult classic lineup of main series games for consoles all the way up to the most recent entry, Mortal Kombat 11. At the core, both the games and previous films have centered around the same narrative, with the movies taking some creative liberties. The existence of several different realms created by elder gods, featuring a constant struggle for complete domination of said realms by a bizarre rogues gallery of sorcerers, khans, and gods. In order to create a balance in the chaos and allow the realms such as Earth Realm a chance to defend themselves, the elder gods created a tournament called Mortal Kombat, where each of the realm's greatest defenders are chosen to fight for its fate. And now 20 years later, Warner Brothers revitalizes its IP on the big screen once again, and despite its very mixed reception, I gotta say, guys, I personally fucking loved this movie. It is, of course, not without its flaws, and far from a perfect movie as both a standalone film and an adaptation of the franchise. But for me personally, this movie pretty much checked off virtually every box that I had walking into it, and that's honestly all I really needed from it, to be entertained and satisfied by the end credits. With these kinds of films, you gotta know what you're signing up for before walking into it and before you can really pass fair judgment. At the end of the day, these movies are face value entertainment, over the top spectacle to guzzle down popcorn with, as were both of its video game and live action roots. While some of the later games in the franchise can certainly deliver some pretty compelling storytelling and character arcs, there's no circling around the fact that Mortal Kombat has always been a franchise littered and even rooted with extreme silliness and physics-defying concepts, albeit very fucking awesome ones. So if this movie is your entry point to the franchise without any prior experience or knowledge of the games or movies, you will easily find yourself turned off, as the film doesn't really waste much time explaining itself or its bizarre world and action in much depth outside of some basic exposition. Me being a veteran to the franchise, I walked into this movie looking for some outrageous gory action and to see some of my most beloved characters come to life in a modern setting. The first was definitely definitely delivered, although not as much as I would have liked and more in dosages, with the latter ultimately satisfying me the most. Now, if you're a hardcore fan of the lore like myself, the creative liberties taken and some of the differences in how the story elements are adapted could be a hit or miss for you. For me, I was really surprised by just how much I actually enjoyed some of them, such as Reptile being a literal reptile opposed to being a reptilian humanoid ninja, Sub-Zero being portrayed as a downright malicious killer and an assassin of Outworld, although Sub-Zero as an antagonist is not necessarily a new concept to the series, but it was done best within this movie in my opinion. The alterations done to Melina's character was a welcome surprise, as I originally wasn't the biggest fan of them nerfing her traditional Tarkatan mouth down to just a few sharp teeth. But we do even get an amazing glimpse of that towards the final act that made for some really great payoff. Not every change does work though. I really was not the biggest fan of the concept of the tournament mark that each contestant shared. That was really just a blatant plot device to kind of make some sense out of why all of these characters have bizarre powers in this world, and it did not need to be there for any of this to make sense. This is just the world of Mortal Kombat. There's sorcerers, elder gods, cowboys, overfunded cops, reptilian ninjas, Jason Voorhees, and a bunch of crazy bizarre concepts. It didn't need these marks to explain it all or to validate its own lore. Despite its execution relying on this concept, I was, however, highly satisfied with how each character's abilities did transition onto screen. They got so much right, from Sub-Zero's ice effects to Lu's fireballs, Reptile's camouflage, Sonya's purple blast, Shang Tsung's soul steal, Raiden's lightning teleport, Kano's laser beam. It really made me so much more excited for how they're going to adapt future character installments within this planned trilogy. Aside from the obvious blood and gore, and god damn does it deliver when it delivers. What really made this movie shine for me, and what I think will easily make it shine for most, is the casting. Most of the cast, for the exception of Hiroyuki Sanada, the actor who played Scorpion, who you may recognize from The Wolverine, Westworld, and even recently Endgame, along with Chin Han, who played Shang Tsung, which you would probably recognize from The Dark Knight. The rest of the cast are very under the radar actors and actresses from very much lesser known projects. Hardly any big or mainstream names are headlining this film, which is just not something that you see nowadays with major IP adaptations in Hollywood, especially from a company like Warner Brothers. This really honestly was such a welcome surprise, and in all honesty worked in this film's favor so much, because when I saw these characters on screen, I wasn't thinking, oh, that's Robert Downey Jr. or oh, that's Angelina Jolie. I was thinking, that's Sonya Blade, that's Liu Kang, that's Kano. Oh my god, speaking of Kano, Josh Lawson absolutely steals the show in this film, a character that I really did not expect to have as big of a role or as much impact as he did. There really are so many standout characters such as Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Sub-Zero, and Sonya. There were only two performances that were by all means not terrible or even bad, really. They just kind of fell short for me, that being Shang Tsung and Raiden. Chin Han does a very good job at portraying a much more menacing and dictating Shang Tsung. He just finds himself in a position where it's difficult to not be overshadowed by Hiroyuki Tagawa's iconic presence from the '95 Mortal Kombat.
Your brother's soul is mine,
which has recently kind of become the staple of Shang Tsung within the franchise. Shang Tsung has been both young and old within the series, though multiple times, so I would really love the possibility of seeing Hiroyuki reprise Shang Tsung as the older version of Chin Han's Shang Tsung within a future sequel. As of Raiden, I was completely fine with the decision to cast an Asian actor, given that Raiden really should have been an Asian character from the beginning. It's actually always bothered me that MK consistently portrays Raiden as a white man in both the main title games and especially the film adaptations, when his character has very clear Asian cultural influences in both costume design and name. Within this film, for me, it is more of an issue of a lack of presence. While the movie nails the lightning and elder god effects very well, the actor just doesn't really nail conveying any sort of godly presence like the games do so well. The absolute biggest issue that I had with the film overall, and it is the biggest flaw without a doubt, is the introduction of the character Cole Young. Like, why? Seriously, just why was this decision made? It's one thing to take the opportunity to introduce to us a brand new badass character, and another to make the leading character that will take up most of the screen time and plot just an average guy with a very underwhelming and frankly dumb ability. I seriously cannot stress this enough. I do not fault Louis Tan whatsoever for this. He is a huge fan of the source material and was originally slated to appear in the 3rd season of the Legacies web series as Kung Jin, Kung Lao's cousin introduced in Mortal Kombat X, which at the time the season would have coincided with the launch of the game. But I just do not see why they would think it would be best to introduce a whole new character when he was already casted to be Kung Jin, an existing character, and then make this new, much blander character the lead of the entire film, especially when they have an entire roster of beloved and bizarre characters at their fingertips. But, you know, as I said, despite my gripes with the biggest being Cole's irrelevance, I was largely satisfied and entertained with this movie. While it doesn't have the absolute pinnacle of effects and action choreography, it easily triumphs Mortal Kombat 95 and makes an absolute embarrassment out of Annihilation. But then again, that really is not hard to do. Like, it really is just not even a discussion. There is just no way in hell that this is better. All around, some very, very surprisingly solid acting, great character interactions backed by some very cool action pieces, with my favorite being both the introduction and finale with Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Great costume designs that transition so well from its source material, and so much subtle love for the games. That's honestly all I really needed and wanted from this, guys. Really not much else. And to be honest, I was surprised just how much more I got aside from my own expectations. I really do feel like a lot of the negative criticism reflected more on people's expectations walking into this film, as it so oftenly does. And everyone will have a different opinion. This film may or may not work for many casual and hardcore fans alike. The film would have certainly been much better with just a few minor tweaks and had it just not featured Cole at all. But you also cannot forget that it is just the first of what is a planned trilogy. So there is plenty of room for improvement, and honestly, I can't wait to see where it goes from here. I'm going to give Mortal Kombat 2021 an 8 out of 10.
Kinda wins.
Kids your age think they're invincible, and it holds them back, makes them careless. The thing is, you're different. You actually are invincible.
Invincible is created and written by Robert Kirkman, the creator of the smash hit franchise The Walking Dead. The series is based on a long-running comic book line with its first issue debut back in 2003 alongside The Walking Dead and spanning into its last in 2018. If you are a big or even casual fan of the superhero genre, especially a fan of DC material, which this series heavily borrows from above all, then you're already familiarized with Invincible's structure, lore, and characters. Full disclaimer, before I actually watched this series, Invincible was just something that I have always only ever heard of. I walked into this show essentially completely unaware of its core premise and the big plot twist, which I'm about to get into in a bit. If you know, you know. But I really hadn't seen much of anything with the comic books prior to this, except for one fight between Mark and an upcoming villain that left me saying, "Jeez." and I was entirely unaware of its central concepts, Mark as a character, or even how much influence it drew from DC. Its primary team of heroes, the Guardians of the Globe, are very much a carbon copy of the Justice League, right down to the names and abilities being virtually the same, just minorly tweaked, like Martian Man, War Woman, the Green Light, Red Rush, and so forth. Characters like Omni-Man, the father of the main protagonist Mark, and their people, the Viltrumites of Viltrum, are very much a reflection of Superman and the Kryptonians. There is even a demon detective character, Damien Darkblood, which is essentially a combination of Hellboy and John Constantine. On top of these characters, though, there are a handful of very cool original characters such as Alan the Alien, Battle Beast, Monster Girl, the Mauler twins, which is one of my favorites, Robot, Machine Head, and much more. The comic and show are also very similar in concept to that of The Boys, which is also, funny enough, another Amazon Prime exclusive, featuring the same superhero world shown in a grittier light concept. The show treads familiar grounds of the teen superhero narrative that you've seen before with Spider-Man, Teen Titans, and Young Justice. However, despite its similarity to so many other titles like it, what makes Invincible so special is that it somehow finds a way to be different from them in a way that you can't entirely explain, but you can feel throughout its entire runtime. There's something so real in its storytelling, characters, and execution, especially for an animation in comparison to that of a live action series like The Boys. Invincible manages to stand apart from everything else in its medium, and by the last episode, I was floored by the whole experience. Guys, honestly, in an era of a very saturated genre of superhero content, this is one of my favorite projects put out in a while. I cannot necessarily speak of how the show compares to the comics, but I loved what I saw so much that it actually inspired me to pick up the first few volumes to read myself. So much about this series shines throughout its runtime, but the voice acting is really its crown jewel. It is terrific, and the casting is fantastic. Each character is complemented so well by their voice counterparts. Kirkman actually brought most of the Walking Dead cast aboard to voice the entire Guardians of the Globe cast, with Steven Yeun as the lead protagonist Invincible himself, alongside a star-studded and bizarre roster of actors such as J.K. Simmons, Sandra Oh, Walter Goggins, Zachary Quinto, Seth Rogen, and a lot more surprises. There were so many unexpected big names on this project, and they all provide superb voice acting, with the standouts appropriately being the main characters, Steven Yeun's Invincible and J.K. Simmons' Omni-Man. On the subject of Omni-Man, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. The ending to the first fucking episode. When I tell you that the last 4 minutes of that episode had my jaw firmly planted on the floor until the very last second, I seriously am not exaggerating. It was a terrific episode, and it was paced so well that it really kind of almost felt like its own standalone thing even. Throughout the entire episode leading into its climax and throughout most of Mark's life since he was a boy, Omni-Man teaches him about Viltrum, this utopian society of super beings who travel the galaxy to advance and help races, hence his own presence on Earth, and that one day Mark will become one himself. Primarily due to J.K. Simmons' fantastic voice acting, I really found myself loving this character, his relationship with Mark, and his role as a mentor and a father to him. Then everything goes to fucking hell, and it really just does not stop for even a second after that moment. This was the scene that sets the stage for the entire season and series moving forward. Mark's journey into Viltrumhood and becoming a hero just like his father transitions into a brilliantly crafted whodunit mystery, with the characters who didn't see what happened trying to figure out why the Guardians were slaughtered, and the audience who did trying to figure out why Omni-Man did it. This show, in all honesty, only just missed the mark for me to be a perfect 10, but it does have some minor issues here and there for me, primarily in pacing and at a few times the animation. While its 40-minute runtime per episode really does the show a lot of favors in terms of pacing, allowing for so much more lore and story to be developed in a much larger dose rather than thinning it out. It can be a double-edged sword towards the middle of the season where the momentum is lost a bit with arcs like the one on Mars and with the cyborgs. But these pacing issues for me were largely dwarfed by the fantastic rosters of characters and other plot threads like the suspense of Debbie Grayson investigating Nolan on her own time behind his back, the cat and mouse game between Cecil and Nolan, Adam Eve's journey into becoming her own hero in person, the mystery behind Robot's real intentions, and a lot more. Also, because of each episode's 40-minute runtime, it is apparent that there were some budget constraints as far as animation went. There were a few times where characters were just flying in the air without really moving other than their lips. But I am also accustomed to this because of my experience with animes which have used this animation technique before, and despite these hiccups, the show more than makes up for it when it really counts in some truly beautifully animated sequences. I've seen some criticism regarding Mark always getting his ass handed to him for a hero named Invincible, but I know that's more of a matter of patience and part of the hero's journey than any kind of flaw. He's not just going to earn the name Invincible in the first season of a very, very long story. Ultimately, what really made this show come together for me was its incredible finale. It was honestly perfect. And although I won't be scoring these episodes individually, I can say confidently that the last episode is without a doubt a 10 out of 10 for me, and one of the best finales to the first season of a show since Game of Thrones. Nolan Grayson has become one of my favorite characters in a long time. His role is certainly a roller coaster ride from a caring father to someone that I absolutely hated for most of the season, to a character that you realize is much more complicated than what you see on the surface. And I really just cannot wait to see where his character will go. If you guys haven't seen this one yet and I managed to pique your interest, check it out because it is so worth the time, especially if you're a big comic book nerd just like myself. I'm very much looking forward to diving back into the world of Invincible and where this show will take Mark to as a character. I'm going to give Invincible Season 1 a 9.5. Thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart as always for tuning in and for your patience. It feels so good to be back and to be working again and just to be talking about all the things that I love with all of you. I'm going to be releasing one more catch-up video which will contain the reviews for Resident Evil 8, Returnal, and Ratchet and Clank. And then I'll finally be moving on to all the great stuff that's dropped recently like Loki, Black Widow, Bad Batch, and much more. If you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next episode.